Hello again from the Midlands, and of course we too are here live at the Liberal Democrats annual conference at the International Convention Centre in Birmingham, where I'm joined by one of our region's three Liberal Democrat MPs, Martin Horwood from Cheltenham, and by a no doubt very proud Councillor Paul Tilsley, welcoming his party conference to this, his home city, for the first time as Council Deputy Leader. But I've been hearing some scathing criticisms of the political leadership here. They're accused of a monumental failure during last month's riots, which scarred us all so deeply here in the Midlands and beyond. A month and more has passed since the deaths of three young Asian men at Winston Green in Birmingham. It was potentially the most threatening moment of the summer riots. An even more dangerous deepening of tensions between the different communities here was avoided, but only just, according to the head of Sandwell's Rights and Equality team.
We saw a lot of rumours going around that could easily have triggered a race riot.
What's your view of the quality of the political leadership that we've seen here in Birmingham?
There has been a distinct lack of leadership when it comes to taking control and taking charge of major disturbances, and in particular within the city there's a great level of disappointment at the lack of leadership that was shown at the time of crisis.
So moving into the political autumn, the party conferences, you obviously think that the political leaders now must rise to a challenge, must accept that.
No, absolutely. I think when they go into their little huddles and they go into their conference season, which we're in now, I think the leadership and all political parties need to recognise who has elected them and why we've elected them. We've elected our politicians to serve us in times of need, to make the right decisions that looks after societies and communities, and unfortunately there's been a monumental failure of our political leaders to ensure that communities work in a harmonious way and that they are there when we need them in a time of crisis.
So, though much of the damage has now been repaired, the political arguments are reverberating still, not least over the government's plans for elected police commissioners. The Home Secretary compared unaccountable and invisible police authority chairmen unfavourably with the leadership given to Londoners by their elected mayor. And the Conservative former Deputy Prime Minister Lord Heseltine levelled very much the same complaint about what he saw as the marked absence of proper political leadership in all our major cities except London during those critical days and nights. In the event, Birmingham's Liberal Democrat Deputy Council leader did as much as any local politician to get his message across.
There's just been absolute mindless violence against property, thuggery by children frequently. Parents have got to start to take some responsibility for the actions of their children. We've seen the Handsworth riots twice, we've seen the Lozells only 4 years ago, but we've always come together as a community and communities and move forward.
And council leaders across Birmingham and the Black Country did their best to restore order.
Thank you for coming.
But for sheer political clout and, yes, showmanship, they're no match for Boris in the eyes of ministers, more than ever determined to press ahead with their plans for new brooms of our own, directly elected city bosses in Birmingham and Coventry. And for more on the summer riots and now this autumn political conference season, you can, of course, go to my blog. And while the conference delegates are continuing to gather here at the ICC, here with me to respond directly to Dr. Campbell's distinctly dim view of the political leadership shown during the riots are Councillor Paul Tilsley and Martin Horwood, MP for Cheltenham, which is incidentally the only council in our region where the Liberal Democrats have an overall majority for now. Councillor Tilsley, how would you respond to what Dr. Campbell has had to say about the local leadership in this city?
Well, frankly, I'd refute it totally because I understand your clip shows me dealing with the media on the Monday and the Tuesday and the Wednesday. And I was there at the control centre. I also had the benefit of the Deputy Prime Minister coming up on Tuesday afternoon and taking a personal interest in what was taking place, and also being able to brief him at Lloyd House. The following morning, after it became known that there'd been the tragic fatalities, the Deputy Prime Minister was on the phone at 10 o'clock to get a briefing from me. So I would refute the lack of political leadership. I think we showed it not only locally but nationally.
Of course, very troubled times, and in a way, Martin, you tend to think of Cheltenham being at one removed from it all, but of course Gloucester, not very far away from your town, did have very significant looting and other problems during those difficult days.
Yes, and in fact, if you think back to the 1980s, Cheltenham itself had problems when there were riots nationwide in those days, and there were tense moments in Cheltenham as well. And I think politicians everywhere have to provide leadership and have to provide a positive response to the rioting that happened and which damaged so many communities.
Now that time has passed by, I mean, you, Paul, were talking about a lot of the trouble being with children, but it wasn't just children, was it? There were some people in quite senior, responsible jobs who got involved. What do you reflect on it now, this, 4 or 5 weeks on?
I think it was, in part, an opportunist crime for many people. The oldest individual was 65 years old that we arrested. The youngest was 10, and the average age was 17 to 24. There's obviously a great deal that we've got to do. We've got to create a linkage so that people feel that they've got a real investment in society, that they belong to society. And that's not just a challenge in Birmingham, it's a national challenge that we have.
Do you worry, Martin, that we've heard politicians from particularly both the coalition parties talking about the full force of the law being brought to bear and the immediate aftermath of these terrible disturbances? Do you worry actually that there was something fundamentally illiberal about some of the exemplary sentences that we've seen handed down in the event?
I think there probably is a bit of concern amongst delegates here this week that just focusing on custodial sentences, on sort of things like ideas like restricting social media, isn't certainly the whole response, perhaps not even the right response, and that we do need to look at some of the deeper issues that Paul has identified. I mean, we've talked about political leadership. I don't think Boris Johnson parading down the street with a broom is actually political leadership, that's PR.
But it does demonstrate a certain amount of clout and high-profile showmanship, which is surely part of the kit of parts as a political leader, isn't it, Paul?
Patrick, what I was doing, I was at Control Centre on Monday evening, Tuesday morning. I was at Gold Command on Tuesday. I was at Gold Command on Wednesday. I was very much involved. I was showing leadership. I was making sure that Birmingham City Council were involved with our partners in dealing with the issues that were coming out of the looting and the rioting that was taking place. I was showing leadership where it mattered, and also with the media, with yourself included.
Final quick thought before we move on, Martin. Chris Sims, the West Midlands Chief Constable, told the Home Affairs Committee this week that they couldn't have done more to help those 3 young men who died. Do you accept his opinion briefly?
Well, I don't know the details of that particular case, so I won't comment on it, but I think the important thing is it's very easy to look for an instant knee-jerk reaction to these things. Okay. The deeper issues that Paul has talked about are the important things we have to look at.
We'll be back with you a little bit later in the programme. For the moment, thank you both very much indeed.